Welcome to Brit Sci-Fi Online from the National Space Centre, a celebration of British science fiction. Huge thanks to all our guests and supporting groups who have given their time freely to support this event, the fans and the National Space Centre charity. The National Space Centre itself is looking forward to welcoming visitors to the centre soon, in person, so make sure you check our website as booking in advance will be essential. When I was young, there were two shows that you just had to watch. One was the inevitable Doctor Who, but the other one was perhaps a more revolutionary show starring young kids just like me and my mates at school. It was the Tomorrow People, a group of teenagers with psychic and other paranormal abilities who used to use these special gifts to battle evil. Our guest is someone who started drumming at a very early age, was thrust into stardom in the teenage 70s band Flintlock, appearing in the TV shows You Must Be Joking and Fanfare. He joined the Tomorrow People playing a character called Mike. It's great to be talking to Mike Holloway. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Keith. Hello, Keith. Lovely to see you.
Yeah.
And it's great that we can still communicate with people through this funny, awful COVID time.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the reasons for running this. And we have, we would normally run a science fiction event in person at the National Space Centre, and of course that's not possible at the moment. But
No.
So it's one way to, they've always been very popular with the fans, and we've always been, it's always been nice to do that and have lots of people take part. So it's a great way to carry on that online, virtually. I must say, you're looking very well, sir. Very well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I do appreciate that. I'll send you the check.
Good. Like it. So we've got lots of questions from fans here, so I'm going to press on and run through them. So Julie on Facebook wanted to know, there still seem to be a lot of Tomorrow People fans around today. Why do you think the show lives on with the fans? What do you think its longevity is?
Well, I think the wonderful thing about that question is that back in the early 70s to the late 70s, where Tomorrow People was at its peak, it was only the strike at Thames Television that stopped the Tomorrow People, and it went dark for 3 months, as my followers and followers of Thames TV back then will all remember. But you see, back then, you had 3 TV channels. That was it. There was no computer games. There was pip phones to make communication. So I feel, looking back, that people obviously completely absorbed things like Doctor Who, Tomorrow People, and all of our television shows, and lots of big drama shows that were going on, like, Minder and the Sweeney back in the day. And it was millions upon millions. It was like 18, 20, 25 million people at a time would watch these successful television programs because there was nothing else to do, A, and B, all those people back then, like me, people forget I was only 13. My sort of followers and the fans of the Tomorrow People now are 50 to 60, maybe even going on to mid 60s to 70 now. And it's nostalgia. I believe it's nostalgia. I think it's because so many millions and millions of people watched it that's why it's still a cult and not as successful as it should have been as Doctor Who. But it's that nostalgia. I think people just glue to the fact that they got so much from it, and it was so much a part of their young life as a human being.
I think that's true, and I think one of the things about their not being so many channels is today, you've got your Netflix and your Amazons and your dozens of TV shows and everything else. So I think probably today you don't kind of go into a situation and talk about the same program because you've all been watching different programs. Whereas at school, you'd come in the next day and you'd all be talking about the same program because you'd all watched it. So I think that makes a big difference as well.
Yeah. Exactly. And all these catch-up things. I mean, we're watching something now because in COVID time, we've had no choice but to not work. Yeah. I mean, our industry, show business, has been mullered by the government. As everybody knows, they've been, it's been shameful what they've done to it. But I'm now watching things and saying, oh, this is great. I've been watching The Crown and people are saying, I watched that 3 years ago. What are you talking about? It's catch up. It's changed, hasn't it, Keith? It's changed.
Yeah, you can watch things whenever you want to. It's interesting. So have you watched it back recently at all? And what do you think of it these days?
Well, it's easy for people to extract the urine, as I say politely. You get my gist. But back then, whatever was going on with Doctor Who in the early days, the special effects now look very funny and hysterical. There wasn't any special effects, but I tell you what did happen. It meant that the scripts, the messages, and the actual delivery of us actors and actresses had to be spot on, because we didn't have CGI, special effects, digital age, and all these incredible things that they can do with effects now, that if you've got a weak story, you can kind of glitch over it with
absolutely
stunning effects. Whereas back then we didn't have that. So I watch it with fond memories, because it was a big part. People forget, when I was 12 I started with the Tomorrow People, and it was just a big thing for me. I was a boy.
No, I mean, I think that's very true about the story. It's one of the things I believe very strongly. I think especially if you come from a stage background, you can have an empty stage with no props and no set and still tell an enthralling story. So I think the story has to be there, and I think that's one of the things that was quite strong about those TV shows.
Yeah.
So Paul on Facebook was asking, did you ever get confused by the plots?
Hi, Paul. Thank you for a great question. Listen, I lost the plots completely, because I was filming 3 television shows at the same time. I was filming You Must Be Joking. I was filming The Tomorrow People. I was filming a bit of probably Pauline's Quirks. I was ferreting around studios. So I was recording bits of Tomorrow People out of sequence. So I'd learn a scene, go through it, routine it with the cast, go in and record it, come out, go and do a music link for You Must Be Joking, or a comedy sketch with Pauline Quirk and John Blundell. And so I never really saw them all the way through, A, and B, as far as what show was what and where Hitler was and where the living skins came in, it was confusing, Paul.
Cool. Now I've got a question here from Jacqueline, which is quite relevant to our current situation, I suppose. If Tim could jaunt you or teleport you anywhere, where would you like to go?
Well, I think I would like to probably go to a situation where I could have some influence. Not a politician, but I would like to go back in time, maybe 20 years, and just be a part of maybe helping the world to see things in a different way, and maybe we wouldn't be in quite such, in my opinion, the mess we are now, because my belief is that a lot of the world leaders have let us down. So there you are.
Oh, very lovely. Well, that's a very noble answer. I like that very much. So Mark on Facebook was saying, I love the theme song, and he can still remember it today. And I must admit, I was rewatching some episodes, and that theme song you immediately recognised from Dudley Simpson. But Mark says the graphics are a bit too much to watch, whereas I actually quite like the graphics. But both the music and the graphics created by Doctor Who, ex-Doctor Who creatives, I believe. Was the Tomorrow People influenced much by Doctor Who? Were you very much aware of it, or?
Well, I think it must have been, of course, because so music, songs, they influence creators of music, and they'll pick a vibe out from it and think, I could use that. But obviously you can't plagiarise. But Doctor Who and Tomorrow People were obviously very similar. But of course, the theme of the Tomorrow People, that it was for the kids. It was for the children growing up, and it was educational. I mean, people forget. If you look back now and put yourself in children's shoes, which we all were back then, there was a lot of education. There was a lot of facts given, a lot of observations.
There's some historical areas,
historical events, and it was a great way of almost teaching us all, because we were the actors performing, but I learned a lot doing it myself.
Yeah, I think it's actually one of the nice things about one or two of the recent episodes of Doctor Who is that they've been very educational in that way, and I think that's a great thing for a program to do.
Indeed.
Now, did you, Michael on Facebook wanted to know, it's probably a cheeky question, this, did you get to keep anything from the show?
Michael, thank you. Believe it or not, it doesn't matter what decade you seem to live in making television. God, the purse strings are tight as. I mean, I mean, I might have had the odd jacket. I remember doing the glider sequences with Musako, who played Sutai in The Tomorrow People, as you all know. And there was a lovely flying jacket that I got. But I did actually have one of the jaunting belts and bands, but I'm afraid they're long lost, gone now.
Shame.
So there you go.
Jaunted off by themselves.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I suppose you'd mentioned the jacket. Now, Jane on Facebook says all of you looked very fashionable, and it's one of the things that I remember about the show is that everybody was dressed to the nines. And unfortunately, that's one of the things, of course, that dates the show these days. If anything does, it's probably the costumes. But did you get to have any say in your outfits? And you already mentioned you did get to take one of them home.
Yeah, I got to take a couple of jackets, as I say, my belts, and probably some boots along the way. But did we have much say? Sometimes. It depends on the story. Through the Hitler one, I was a bit of a rebel, and there was 4 episodes of that, as I remember. And I did have a say because it was very much the rebel Mike. So it was the leather jacket with the jeans and the open big shirts, and being a bit, all right, mate, what's going on here? Now, come on, mate. Come on, Tim, I'm going out. And so sometimes we had a say, but in the main, it was pretty much given to us.
Yeah, because, of course, I mean, you would have been dressed quite fashionably, I'm guessing, for Flintlock as well at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we had lots of costumes made for us, yeah.
Now, do you have Stephen on Facebook wanted to ask, do you have a favourite story from the show that you remember?
My favourite story, I think, was the Hitler's Last Stand. They were so challenging for me, and I was just maturing into 15 years old, I think, about then. So I'd learned a lot of craft from mentors like Nick Young and a lot of people like Dennis Waterman, George Cole, people I was working with around that time. Believe it or not, Benny Hill, he taught me loads because I tell you what, that man was a genius.
Benny Hill.
He was a stunning actor. I know he did all the malarkey because that's what made him successful, but he was a very talented, very knowledgeable man. And by the time we got to making those episodes, I felt more assured, and I felt like I was more in control of the environment that I was working in. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, I think a lot of people like that episode, but for all sorts of different reasons. That's related to a question that Helen's asking, which is Tomorrow People often covered quite dark subject or quite serious subjects like Hitler and the Nazis. Yeah. But do you think it was still suitable for children?
Well, of course, because at the end of the day, it's education. And there's nothing wrong with telling facts. It's only if you go off the ball and you start sensationalizing, which the press didn't do quite so much back in the early 70s because they were still finding their way. As people will find out if you watch something like The Crown. And I would like to say I love the Queen, I adore the Queen, and I admire her like I cannot tell you. But without sensationalizing and looking for the rub to score from things, providing you're being factual and you're giving good knowledge, then I think it's a broad spectrum, and it didn't do us any harm. So there you go.
No, I think it was. I think it's quite right. I think it was spot on for kids. One of the things I liked about it, watching it as.
And if you were a parent then, Keith, how lovely. Maybe when the Hitler's Last Stand one was on, or maybe the Living Skins was on, maybe it did make the children ask their parents questions. Well, what did that mean, Mum?
Yeah.
Well, that evokes conversation. It stimulates the mind, and it makes one wiser of fact about things. Yeah.
I mean,
why not?
So I think one of the things that struck me when I was watching it as a kid was that it wasn't patronising. It didn't talk down to you. And in fact, the whole thing about, I think that was fun about the show was it starred people like me, kids at school, and it was on my level because I quite liked that.
I'm glad you said that because that's something that I wouldn't have seen at the time. But I think that's why I was so successful in it with the rest of the Tomorrow People that were cast, because we were real. We weren't you've got it in one. We weren't sort of saying, oh, well, you know this now, you shouldn't do, and all this malarkey. It was straight from the hip, and it was spoken for real.
Yeah, and it very much wasn't the posh kind of BBC children's thing that had come before. So that was great. Now, Ian on Facebook has a question for you, which is talking about the episode of The Heart of Soggoth. Now, was that written for the band? Because that involved the band, didn't it? How did that come about?
Well, again, Ian, very good question. At the end of the day, the writers need material or ideas or concepts to give them a heartbeat to go forward and write more episodes or sequences of episodes of 4 or 6. In that instance, it was the success of the band, and obviously my drumming was often used in Flintlock, as everybody knows. I did the big drum solo at the beginning of You Must Be Joking. I wrote You Must Be Joking, and therefore the success of that was easily moved in to a great what a great storyline that was. I mean, John, Nick Young's character, he didn't know whether he was coming or going, and it was brilliant. I was right on a mission, hypnotizing people, and I knew the power of the rhythm of the drums, and it engaged people. That was a very popular sequence for the Tomorrow People. So it was the band and my drumming that obviously inspired Roger to come up with some more Tomorrow People.
Sounds like you enjoyed that.
Loved it.
You mentioned your drumming. It was pretty good, your drumming, I seem to recall. Pretty good.
Even if I say so myself, I can back it up. There's very few people that can do a paradiddle-diddle as fast as me. And yes, I put the training in. I was taught by some stunning drummers, and I can certainly beat those drums now. And
you started very early as well.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old. Yeah. Cool. So that brings, I suppose that, again, tailors nicely into the next question, which Robert was asking, was saying, were you still at school when filming the show? And if so, how did you cope with schoolwork and working? What a question. Do you know what? This has come up just recently because my nephew, Max, when he reached 13, 14, which he is about now, I started looking at him thinking, genuinely, Keith, and everybody listening, I just don't know how I did what I did because I was recording, I was touring, I was learning script after script after script. I was then in recording studios, but every day I had to do 2.5 hours of private schooling at Thames, me and John Somerton, the guitarist. And talk about burnout. I mean, I did, and I collapsed when I was 16, and I can't remember 6 days of my life. I was in hospital, but it was grueling, and I did have to do my schooling privately. I was taken out of normal school because I was being beaten up and taunted and roughed up by people, because that's what happens. So there you are. It wasn't easy, but I did it.
So you don't even think about that. I mean, if you're in that situation where you suddenly become famous and you're still at school, that's really rough. Because
it was.
Yeah, I can imagine it was. Yeah, and I mean, you talk about that kind of schedule of filming and playing in the band and everything. And I mean, there's so many fit adults who couldn't cope with that. So it must have been quite a time in your life.
Yeah.
So, moving on to something slightly different. Richard on Facebook saying, I always thought the Tomorrow People was a fantastic reflection of diversity. Do you think this was a conscious decision when casting?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, David Bowie had a big connection with Roger Price at the point of the concept of the Tomorrow People, as keen Tomorrow People followers will know. A, and B, it always came back to that masterful way of casting natural talent, real people. So I guess that ebbed all the way through, and it never changed.
Yeah. I mean, there's one of the things. I mean, at the time, you didn't get, watching it, you didn't give it a second thought. But now, looking back on it, you think actually that was quite courageous for the time. That was quite interesting for the time. It shouldn't be, but it actually was.
It was very ballsy because it was early. It was 5 to 5. It was on until 5:25. So it was a very provocative time as to how far you could go.
Yeah.
So it was always a bit near the mark.
Yeah.
But then again, if it wasn't different, would we still be talking about it, and would it have become a cult that it's become today?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
No, no, absolutely. So Sue on Facebook wants to know how you got the part in the Tomorrow People. How did that come about?
Well, I just wrote a big check out to the director and said, look,
that's how it normally works.
what more do you want? No, I think it was a double-edged, perfect synergy of a successful actor, teenager, which I was.
Yeah.
I'd proven myself in all the sketches. I wrote some of them. I wrote a lot of music. They saw me as a little talent ball, and they gave me the opportunity. I still auditioned for Leon Thor, who was the then director, with Roger Price, the writer, and obviously the producer of it, with Sue Turner, who was in charge of children's television in those days. And I had to read and do a scene and do improv, and they accepted me. So, it wasn't given to me. I still had to go and pay my dues in front of the camera and audition.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of worked both ways, because I was successful, and therefore we were both going to win from it.
Yeah. So they were because the success you had with Flintlock was quite big at the time. So they were obviously looking to see if they could build off that, I suppose, as well, which
correct.
Is practical. It's just fortunate that it turned out you could actually do the job and do it very
Thank
well.
you.
I mean, I know if you'd have been some of the pop stars of the time and you'd been put in that situation, it might not have turned out quite so well. But
well, Keith, you've opened up something that people obviously don't sort of often talk about. But again, I was experimental. There was no one around like me back then. I was the only one that was doing all of that. I was acting, singing. It was straight drama, pop gigs, pop success, jumping around, doing live gigs, recording studios. I mean, I was, as I say, 12,
you're making me
13.
tired just talking about it.
It would have been nice. I mean, the bottom line is that the managers and the agents got all the money, but that's what happened in the 70s. I mean, that c'est la vie.
Yeah, absolutely. So, now later on, obviously, they made a US version of the Tomorrow People. Did you watch it, and what did you think about it?
Well, I'll be quite blunt, and that is that Nick Young, myself, and certainly Peter Von Clark were all right. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, we were vaguely approached, I certainly was, as to keep a bit of the old school in that were popular, and it would make sense to do that. In my opinion, the reason it didn't work, because I was teed up to go into what they call Series 2. And they were going to write me in. I had the pre-script, as they call it, the draft for that. I know that Nick Young made a cameo appearance in it as a character, but they steered so far away from what the Tomorrow People was that, and it goes back to what I was saying, even with because the effects were stunning. The effects were brilliant, the CGI, all the powerful imagery and all the gimmicks that was going on, but it didn't have a focus of a story. They did away with Tim, the computer, the heartbeat. They did away with the breaking out process of real people, and the proof's in the pudding, because it only did season 1 and then it wasn't commissioned again after that, which is such a shame, because in my opinion, if they'd rolled us in and connected us back into the concept, which was successful, of kids coming through, and then put the modern twist on it, it probably would have worked better, because the story would have been stronger.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's interesting. I always get frustrated about with Hollywood, because they tend to buy up the rights to a story, and presuming they're doing that because they like the story and they think it's a good story, and then they change everything, and it's like, well, why did you do that? Because you've obviously bought the story because you thought it was good, and then you change it all. Well, it's never, it's not going to work, is it? So
why try and fix something that's not broken? But in my humble opinion, I think the reason it didn't succeed is because they took the heartbeat, the ethos, and the concept of what made the Tomorrow People successful, which can survive for decades.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it and I quite enjoyed it, but that's about, it's one of these things you watch and think, oh yeah, that's quite entertaining, but it didn't really go much beyond that. It wasn't like, oh wow, this is a must see
but
show.
Do you know what? Do you know where I got my clue for how successful it wasn't going to be? Most of the people that I asked after the first 2 episodes, I've still got it. Yeah. They said, "Oh, the special effects are great."
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
And I thought, well, it can't work then.
Yeah.
Because and the amount of people that said to me, "Oh, the special effects are brilliant," I said, "Yeah, but what about the story?"
What about the story?
Oh, yeah, well, it's he's running around and he's good-looking guy and he's upset his girl. And I said, but what was the story?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. No, I don't know really.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think when you are engrossed in the story, you don't actually notice how amazing the special effects and everything else are. It's I quite like watching these shows that show you how they made it, the making of. Because it's one of these things that I watched. Been watching The Nevers recently, which is a new fantastic show, which involves a hell of a lot of special effects and stuff, which you don't notice because you're engrossed in the story. And I was watching the making of afterwards, and it was like, yeah, actually, that's pretty incredible. And it's like you don't realise it at the time. So I think if you rely on special effects, you end up forgetting about the story. So a related question is, do you think they should do a UK remake? And if so, would you like a role in it?
Well, if ever I was in a position, which I hopefully will be again one day, I would like to collaborate with the key players of Tomorrow People, and I would make it myself because I know what I know now, and I've got my contact base of people, and the scripts are very easy to put together because they've kind of already been done in my head. And I would dearly love that opportunity because it's there for the take. It is. It just needs to be done properly and to go back to the heartbeat of what the Tomorrow People was.
Well, the great thing these days is that so many things nowadays are being crowdfunded, on Kickstarter and Patreon and things like that. So anything's possible if you can get the fans interested and get the people together. Who knows? True. It'll be lovely. I got a great deal of fondness for the series.
Watch this space.
Absolutely. So I'm going to end with a final question. That was a question from Karen, by the way. I should mention on Facebook.
Thanks, Karen.
And the US remake was from Andrew. Susan on Facebook is asking, and this is the question I'm going to finish on, I think. If in the Tomorrow People you had special powers, so if you could have any special power now, what would it be?
Oh, Susan, what a great question. Well, I tell you what, because of the madness in the world today, and in my opinion for the last couple of decades, I would absolutely so much, and the amount of people that say to me, I wish I could do this. Not me, but they themselves would like to do it. I would love to be able to teleport to Jaunt. Yeah. Oh, wow. How simple would that make life? So there you are.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant answer. And I mean, I used to do a little bit of travelling, and I like travelling. And the pain is always the actual travelling, the getting when you're there, when you're at the place you want to be to, it's fantastic. And you cut out all the customs control and all that nonsense and everything else. You just be there. So I know, I agree. I think that's a brilliant superpower.
That's it. I've always thought, wow, it would just cut out so much crap. Let's be fair.
Now, so
great question.
Cool. Now, what do you? I suppose I should again just coming to the end of the interview. So I guess I should ask you, what are you up to these days? I mean, obviously, I know you do theatre work, and that's difficult at the moment because theatres are closed. But I think you're doing quite a lot on YouTube and on radio, digital radio. Is that right?
That's right. I've got my own digital radio show, and I'm just talking with a radio platform to move my show. It's called Mike Holloway's Digital World. So anybody listening, just watch my social media, my Twitter @Mike_Holloway, or my Facebook, Mike @Mike Holloway Artist. And, it's all going to be there. But I do have a lot of digital releases on my albums. And that's my own material, my own songs. There's one just been released called The Spirit of the Brave. And it's got 19 tracks on it, and some of them are cover songs, my favourite songs, because on my radio show I do a cover song feature, and my fans suggest me to sing or record a song, and I do it, and then they get a shout out. So, for example, Keith, thanks a lot this week. Keith has suggested that I sing "Wouldn't It Be a Lovely Day the Day I Went to Bangor." So I record it and then play it the following Sunday, and then you get your shout out on my radio show. So There you go.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Love it. Great. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you, Mike. Thank you very much. As a long-time fan of the Tomorrow People and of Flintlock as well, surprisingly. So thank you very much, and I appreciate you spending your time with us.
Well, thank you, Keith. And I would like to say to everybody out there that I am a survivor of this world that we live in, called the COVID world currently. I survived it. I did have it quite badly. So I just want to wish you all well. But more importantly, please be safe and please be respectful of this thing, because it's not over. We've got a lot of things we need to do. And I can tell you for sure that I've had my first jab. I would like to promote the fact that, it's safe to do that. And I'm due my second one in June, and then that'll be me done. And Keith, you've been brilliant. Thank you all for the great questions, and much love to everybody going forward in a positive world that we need to move back into.
Thank you very much, Mike. Excellent. So that was Mike Holloway from the band Flintlock, but obviously as far as Brit sci-fi fans, more importantly from the Tomorrow People, a fantastic show from the 70s. So thanks very much, Mike, for your time. So remember, we've got lots of other great content as part of Brit Sci-Fi Online from the National Space Centre. It's a great celebration of British science fiction. We've got some fantastic things coming up. And thanks to everybody who's given up and taken part to support the event. Thank you. The National Space Centre itself obviously is hoping to open again soon. So please check out the website, and I guess booking in advance will be essential. So thank you very much for joining us, and remember to stay safe. As Mike so rightly said, be careful out there, stay safe. Thank you.